course you were on, how old you were you went in, and the age you are now, and then just start with the whole when you first knew that you were going to be going to Arizona to be, to train, and then the journey there, and then when you got there, just the whole. You just go ahead and talk.
All right. Okay.
And then what you don't happen to say, I'm going to ask
You'll
you
pick it up.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. No. Right.
And then you just keep focused on me, and all will be grand.
Good.
So whenever you're ready.
Right. Right. Well, my name is officially John Ralph Thomas Spencer, a pain, but everybody calls me Jack, and I don't respond to anything but Jack. I was born in 1923, so that will show you I shall be 98 in a couple of weeks' time. What else can I tell you?
What course were you on?
I was on course 25, which was the last fall course in Arizona. And unfortunately, I became seriously ill in the July. I still don't quite know what happened, but I did my last cross-country flight was towards the New Mexico border. I know that much. I can't remember how far I really got. I flew back in an unbelievable electrical storm. I've never seen lightning like it. I can remember landing and then doing another couple of circuits. And then when I got out of the aircraft on the flight line, I collapsed. Just went out. They carried me off to Chandler, Williams Field, American Hospital, and they found I hadn't got any red corpuscles in my blood. And I was there for the best part of 4 weeks, and you can see it from my logbook that I didn't fly for 4 weeks. And I eventually came back to base, and I'd only been back about a day, and we had this enormous hurricane that the storm, as they call it. It piled up all the steams in one big pile, and my contribution to trying to save the place, I can still remember getting all the blankets and shoving them against the doors to stop the water coming, and I was weak as a kitten. And anyway, I got back flying, and Charlie Hanson, my civilian instructor, we flew night and day to make up the four weeks of non-flying. And in consequence, on August the 15th, the 25 intake all had their graduation parade, and there was me standing all alone, looking at them getting their wings, and I still hadn't finished. So that was really felt down. And that night we had, they always had the sort of celebration dinner and dance and that, and of course I went there, no wings. I was the only one with no wings, but for some reason or other I was paired up with Joan Fontaine to dance, and I'd never danced in my life. So that was quite an interesting evening. But and of course after that finished, everybody, the base closed down. Everybody went home to England, and there was Wing Commander Rogers, Lenz, what's his name? Another young lad was there for some reason or other, and that was in the September. Anyway, I flew as long as I could. Regardless of the base not being fully operational. And I completed and qualified as a pilot. And I mean, normally it was a big parade to receive your wings. Well, I just went into Wing Commander Rogers' office, and he said, "There's your wings, chum, and there's your commission." And that was it, boom. That night, Ward Miller, my flight commander, I got to know him quite well, and he invited me up to his house with his wife. I played their piano, and we even went and swum in the dikes or something. He was keen on doing that, and then he took me. No, I got to the station, Mazer Station, and as the train came in to go all the way back to New York, as it turned out, he arranged a formation of 3 86s saying goodbye. And that was quite, heartwarming, really. But I'd got to know him extremely well over the time I was there. He invited us to his Swedish family, and what was it, a Smorgasburg dinner? There's a special Swedish dinner. Smorgasbord, that's it. And this was all so new. And I mean, I hadn't been anywhere other than what I'd done. So, yes, I was lucky. I really was. And when we did go to where was that? To Los Angeles, they had this group of women that looked after people, and I was allocated to 2 what seemed to be very old ladies, so they were probably about 45, and they looked after about 3 of us, and so that sort of made the week, pretty dean. But one thing I've never forgotten, Ward Miller actually took us home in his car, and this sounds silly in a way. I'd never been in a car which was automatic. I didn't know what he meant. He said, "Don't have to change here, it does itself." But while we were driving back, I've never forgotten this. I'd been to the Hollywood Bowl, another thing they did with us. And as we were driving back, he had the radio on, and there was a song coming from the Hollywood Bowl. Can't think what it's called now, but that stuck in my mind all those years, over the years. And no, Ward was he probably wasn't that much older than me when I think about it, but he was such a nice chap. And Charlie Hanson was very quiet and subdued, but boy, could he fly, and did he put some hours in for me, I wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for him. And then coming home, as I say, I got this fly past over the station and came back all the way alone and to New York eventually. And I was based in Fort Hamilton for 3 days. And I still can't figure out how I found my way from there to the Queen Mary, but I went aboard the Queen Mary, and of course I was an officer, so I had like an officer's cabin. I shared it with a naval lieutenant, and I've never forgotten, because I had all this beautiful food. The ship was run by American army people, but the food on board was, oh God, I've never seen it. And I'd had my first lobster in my life. So that was 4 days coming back, and then I got back to England. I had a bit of leave, and by that time I saw my son, who'd been born while I was there. And what happened then? I got moved around quite a bit. I know I went up to Harrogate. There was a base where they sorted out what they were going to do with all these thousands of pilots they got, what they didn't need anymore. And then I ended up on the Isle of Sheppey at Eastleigh, I think it was called. And I was remustered as an MT officer, to train as an MT officer. I'd never driven a car in my life, I'd never seen one. And I went on a 6 weeks intensive driving engineering course. And eventually, in fact, this is a story in itself. I went home on leave, and I was sort of living with my in-laws. and there was what they called a maintenance unit just down the road, which was during the war supplied all the planes, everything that was needed to keep the RAF going. So this maintenance unit was there, and I don't know what made me do it. I went into the transport unit of this huge base, and there was a flying officer air gunner in there who was the transport officer. He said, well, I'm leaving in a couple of months, there's going to be a job here. And I don't know how I got the cheek. I went to the telephone box. I found out the commanding officer of Maintenance Command somewhere in Northwich. How I did all these things, I don't know. And I rang this bloke. I was a little pilot officer, 3 months going in, and now I'm talking to the group captain of the whole command. And I said, well, I've only been home a few weeks, and I've already been posted to North Africa with Transport Command. And I said, but I don't want to go away for a bit. I want to see my wife. And this chap actually arranged to have me transferred from Transport Command to Maintenance Command and give me the job that I wanted. Absolutely, the good Lord was watching. So I sort of, I was there for 2 years, and I didn't have any RAF staff. I had a civilian foreman, 2 civilian charge hands, and 40 really hard-bitten heavy goods drivers. And we had about 50 wagons on the unit. So here was me. They all respected me because I had this little ring on my arm, but really and truly, I mean, I was useless. But somehow I gained their respect, and it worked. And my one big claim to fame, I think, was, I don't know if you remember, Group Captain Donaldson broke the airspeed record off of Shoreham in 47, I think it was, 630 miles an hour. But we had huge mooring buoys. They were huge things. And my claim to fame was organising, getting all these buoys on 40 lorries all the way down to Shoreham. And, well, I didn't actually do anything after that. They laid them out in a mile-long run. So he had a mile-long, and he was flying at about 200 feet, no more, to get the best speed records. So that's my claim to fame. So.
Sorry, real quick there, just before you keep going.
Where do we go from there?
Yeah, I'm just gonna move the mic.
Oh, right. Is
really
it?
quickly.
Have I shifted it?
No, I'm getting a little bit of rubbing, so I'm just gonna put it on the front so you don't have to worry about it. Doing really well though. Doing quite a bit so far.
Do you remember your journey there to Arizona?
Yes. I can give you some of that.
Bad. Okay, when we readjusted.
These right there, is that all right?
Okay, yeah, it's all right. I'll just hang. Otherwise, I'll lose. I did. Yes, I got remustered, and then I was actually offered a permanent commission, and my wife didn't want me to do that, so I got turned down on that. But then I was moved on to Headquarters Maintenance Command in Andover as a staff officer, and the last thing I did of any use was arranging the transport for the Berlin airlifts. I didn't actually get involved, it was just all paperwork and that, but so 2 claims to fame, as it were. But turning it on its head, gosh, it was a long business. I joined the RAF at Lord's, and I went to Aberystwyth in number 6 initial training wing. That's where I sort of started, and we were knocked into shape. And in my particular case, we had a fantastic Corporal Barrett. I've never forgotten him. He was so kind, but he was so firm. and we were only there, 3 months, and there was a crowd of youngsters that had never marched in their lives. And by the end of the 3 months, we were marching in a continuity drill at 140 feet a minute, paces a minute, equal to the top rank in the army. And he kidded us we were going to Buckingham Palace. But and the funny thing was, I met him years and years afterwards in Quicksave head office in North Wales, and we both recognised each other. It was almost 20 years ago. It was a smashing bloke. But yes, where were we? That was sort of all going, but starting at the other end, we left Aberystwyth. We were pushed around because I don't think they knew what to do with us. And I remember going to Scarborough. We were based there for a few days. I played volleyball on the beach and broke this finger. So I had that in plaster, stuck out like that for weeks. And by the time I was moved on, I went to a Coastal Command unit in Bircham Newton in Norfolk. And they were principally there to literally fly out and spot for Japs shot down over the North Sea. It was square searching. We did that, and we used to get. There was probably about 10 cadets that got pushed onto this unit, and we were given turns of going up with the Hudson and lying in the bomb bay to literally be another couple of hours searching. And that in itself, yes, they used to give us sergeant stripes as we went on board the plane. So if we got shot down, we'd be treated by non-commissioned officers. As soon as we came off the plane, they took them away. But that was, another event in one's life. And what happened? While I was there, I got married at the ripe old age of 20 on May the 26th. So we went back to Heaton Park. That was our sort of base, backwards and forwards. We went from Heaton Park yes, that's right. We were called to Heaton Park and sent to East Kirkby, which is a bombardrome. And we'd only been there half an hour, and the armourers had us loading bombs with detonators. Just shove your arm up and push it in. We had no training. And I didn't know what I was doing. I don't think it would have exploded, but you think when you look back. So that was a bit of experience. And where happened for that was East Kirkby. And we were there for quite some time. This was during the invasion, so we were sort of a backup type of thing on any job that was around. And then out of the blue, we were about 800 of us, I think, all over the country. We were all rushed down to London because it was the period of the V2s and the V1, especially the V2 rockets. And London was getting pounded by these rockets, and houses were getting knocked out all over the place. So they turned us into roof tilers. We were based in RAF, I can say Hounslow, not Hounslow, Hornchurch. They used to take us in 3-ton Bedford lorries to Leyton Orient football ground, and there we'd get dispersed all over East London, and our main job was to get some sort of tarpaulins on roofs. We couldn't repair the roofs, but it was to try and make the houses sort of waterproof, and I didn't like heights at all, but somehow I got on a roof with a tarpaulin. But And it was quite interesting. One day, I was in the East End of London, and in a block of flats, and I was sort of literally ordered to go to this flat, and knocked on the door. Chap had a load of broken windows, and we had to somehow patch in the holes. But it was an old Jew boy who used to gut herrings, and he had barrels of herrings, and it stunk to high heaven. So that was the event in itself. But so what happened then?
So now, when you went to Arizona, though,
Yep.
did you go? What ship did you go?
Right,
on?
I'll come back. Yes, I'll come back. Yes, we've sort of more or less finished what happened afterwards. What happened? I was at Aberystwyth, because I'd done all these other things, and we went back to Heaton Park. Kept going to Heaton Park, expecting to go overseas, and then in the December, in the pouring rain, we were on parade, and get all your kit ready. You'll be joining the Mauritania tomorrow morning. So after all that moving around during the year, which wasted a year of training really, we went to Liverpool, and I think we went out on a sort of picket launch and climbed the gangway and went on the Mauritania, which was it was not as big as the Queen Mary, but it was a pretty big liner and a fast one. And so we took off, and we went highfalutin up the coast of Ireland, across the north of Ireland, and then we dropped down and went all the way down to the equator, and all the way across, and then up again alongside the American and then Canadian, and got to Moncton. So we went through, I don't know how many different temperatures, and when we got to Moncton, the ship was absolutely covered in ice. Well, we got to Halifax, that's where we disembarked, but it was, all the rails were sort of thick in this sort of ice. So we'd gone through heat waves and whatever. The amazing thing was, years afterwards, I found from my father, who'd been in the Navy all his life, was actually on a frigate giving us escort going round the north of Ireland. And I mean, neither of us knew we were that close, and I hadn't seen him for years. And so that was sort of another bit of news, as it were. But we got to Halifax, and we went into Moncton, and you'll see a photograph there of the chapel in Moncton that I took. I was quite intrigued by that. And we were there for about 3 or 4 days, I think, and it was freezing. God, boy. But as soon as you went into the unit where we sort of lived, it was sort of 90 degrees central heat. Never heard anything about it. So we were there for about 3 days, and then everybody was sort of split up. Some were sent to Canada, some went there, some went to Texas, and I ended up in Arizona. And
how did you get to Arizona?
On train. We went we went by train from Moncton, sort of cross country. It was just a single rail track, and somewhere or other we ended up in Montreal, and we sort of got out there for stretch our legs, I suppose, as much as anything. And then we moved on. I remember going across a big bridge, and we ended up in Chicago. And I think we probably changed trains then. I can't really remember. I can remember buying an apple in Chicago, and it cost me 50 cents. And that was like it was $4 of the pound in those days. I can't afford this. I was on 2 and 3 a day. Anyway, we got the train, and because it was best part of 5 days on the train to Arizona, so we were in carriages that we sort of sat, and we had a meal in the carriage, and then at night the the sort of storage space up top was flapped down as a bed. So one chap slept below and somebody climbed up and climbed into this space. And that's what we did for 5 days.
What was your first impression of Arizona?
Strange. We got there at probably about 5 o'clock in the morning. It was freezing cold. We literally, we all put our big greatcoats on. And we were cold, and we waited for the yellow peril, they called it, to take us to Falcon Field. And by the time we got to Falcon Field, probably about 7 o'clock, it was sort of 140 in the I never felt heat like it, and I never could stand heat, but it was different in Arizona. It was a dry heat. And I got used to it, and we used to play volleyball and did all the flying and everything else. Used to sweat night and day, but no, that was quite an event to sort of be there and be. There were orange trees that side and desert that side. It was funny. We had a chap called Flower, and he's. When it happened, actually, it must have been while I was in hospital. His engine caught fire, and he had to bail out. And there was no sat nav. Nobody knew quite where he was. And anyway, they sent out a vehicle search party all over the desert, and eventually found him hanging in a cactus tree. And I thought I've never forgotten this. That was the perfect name for Flower. And he married an American young lady, and he moved up into not Arizona, the next state up. I forget which one is which. But I've often wondered whether he's still alive. But and then, of course, as I say, it all went wrong when I had this whatever. Sorry, you're going to ask?
Were there any other excursions that you went on when you were there? You did the Hollywood one.
Yes, I went there. I went there with Ward Miller. He took us once and brought us home. Another time I hitchhiked with a couple of chaps, and we had a scary time coming back in hitchhiking. We got involved with I don't know what they were. They were louts, and they wouldn't let us out of the car. And I still don't know how we got out of that car. They were going to whisk us off into the desert, murder us, I think. No, I never actually went off base. As I didn't have any money, and whatever money I had to send home to Eileen and the baby, and one thing I've often felt terrible about, there was a chap called Peter Sayers who smoked heavily, and we used to get so many cigarettes free, or somewhere, a packet of about 20 packets, I suppose. And rightly or wrongly, I used to sell him to him for about $1 or something, which he was chuffed with. But he died from lung cancer a few years ago, which I've never forgotten selling him these cheap cigarettes. Encouraged him. But no, we had lots of different people within the course. It was quite a mixed crowd. We had a chap named Gore, I think it was. He became a minister of the church. I think he stayed out there as a minister of the church in Arizona. And of course we had, I think there's 24 cadets that got killed in training in Mesa Cemetery, which the local people look after every year, never forgotten. So it was, a fantastic experience for, what was, I was still pretty young even at 20. But,
Do Do you remember what the church was?
What, in Mesa?
Mm-hmm.
No, I was only thinking about it last night, strangely enough. All I know, it's in, well, it tells you in that book, it's in there somewhere. But there's 24 graves there of these lads that just got killed in training, you know, which came into land and it all went wrong and boom, boom. And I guess, as I say, my friend that got caught in the flower, he was lucky, really. He could have easily have died in the desert. He could have died not anybody finding him. But he lived to say another tale.
Now, the brown book that you have in the kitchen.
Yep.
What is the brown? Explain the brown book.
To be able to fly, that was one thing, the skills of actual flying. But we used to fly early in the morning, or we did groundwork study early in the morning. I think we used to pack in about 12:30. We used to be up very early because it got too hot to do anything. But within that manual was every subject that we had to study, and there's about 11 of them, and I listed them on the back. That was part of the total wings exam. So you had the flying wings exam, and then you also had the exam for the study. And it was tough. It was 100 multiple choice questions, which made it fairly reasonable, but you had to get 99% to pass. And if you didn't pass that, you were off the course anyway. So it was pretty grueling stuff. I mean, we sort of packed in probably, I don't know, probably about 2 in the afternoon, probably had our meal, and then we'd quiz each other all the evening on everything. You know, that's all we did was ask each other questions to learn what we had to learn. And we were only there for, you know, there were young green kids that had never seen an aircraft, half of us. And at the end of it, we were not exactly specialist pilots, but there we were able to fly an aircraft and have all this knowledge. You know, they really, they were good American instructors.
I just want to say, you don't remember a Cyril Russell, do you?
No.
And what about a Roy Broadley?
No.
I just thought I'd check those couple of names.
They'd be in the
Yes.
in the book somewhere.
I just wasn't sure if they were if they were particular ones you remember. Now, did you stay friendly with anyone after you left?
No, because you know I came home alone. I left it. You know, I lost everything. What did happen? I was in Fort Hamilton for 3 days alone, and then somewhere or other I got on the Queen Mary. I can't remember actually how I got there. I remember having a ride into New York and having a look at. I've gone up the what do you call it? The highest building as it was in those days, Empire State Building. I remember looking over the rail, and I can remember the subway with all this graffiti. Everywhere you went was covered in graffiti. I'd never seen anything like it. I was in a huge city, and I just really didn't know where I was half the time. I don't know. I got around, and I used to go back into Fort Hamilton, and then, of course, that's right. I got sort of military transport from Fort Hamilton to the Queen Mary, and then on the Queen Mary, one day out of the blue, there were 6 colleagues. They were all policemen before they went in the RAF, and they were all going back to their police jobs. And there is a photograph of us somewhere with me in the middle, the officer, and my sergeant friends, but I never saw them again.
What about food in Arizona? Do you remember the food at all?
We were fed very well. We had a wonderful canteen. But the one thing I do remember more, well, I remember the metal plates with all the sections. And you had this there, you had your sweet there and your soup there or whatever. But the one thing I can never forgot, we used to get watermelon morning, night and day. And I loved it at first, but I got to the point I just didn't want to see a watermelon. They used to have the big ones, and there's a little one, I forgot what it's called now. And I just prayed that we'd get this little one, which was sweet and juicy. The other ones were, well, I don't know, they had a sort of scenty taste, and after a while they began a little, but we had it for breakfast, lunch and dinner. Yeah, that was food. Food generally, I mean, I'm a sort of person, I eat anything that comes along, so it was good food, you know. We were jolly sight better than what my wife was getting in England on rations. I used to feel so guilty. They had the bombs, they had the V2 rockets, and they were on very severe rationing, and there I was living it up.
Did you have a family assigned to you? Was there a family in Arizona that was assigned to you, or was it just...
No, you had this group of ladies, I forget what they were called now, they had a special name, that were based in Phoenix. And in the room I've got this load of photographs of this chap name. It's almost like me going through his photo album. But he used to go into Phoenix every weekend according to his records, and he was put up by some friends in Phoenix, and I don't think he had a few girlfriends and or whatever, but I stayed on base. One, I didn't sort of know anybody, and two, I didn't have any money. Just couldn't afford to sort of go into Phoenix, I did go in once. But what did happen was quite an event actually on VD Day, yeah, but the end of the war in Germany, and President Truman cancelled all the lease lend system, and we didn't have any fuel. We weren't allowed to fly or do anything. And Wing Commander Rogers flew to Los Angeles to the British consulate to work with somebody in Washington to renegotiate what we could do to get us back flying. And he actually took me and one other, and we flew all the way in his two-engine, and he took us for a meal. And then he left us to sort of wander while he went and negotiated, and then we flew back. And he gave me an opportunity to fly the plane. And I'd never flown a twin-engine plane in my life. And we were just coming over the California-Arizona border. And in that area, there's sort of semi-mountains, there's a sort of gorge that you fly through. A place named... I've forgotten the name now, began with a B anyway. And as we were going through, and though I knew I was not doing what I should do, I can still remember him saying, for Christ's sake, pull up. And I was just gradually diving down a bit instead of keeping straight and level flight. But he was a really, he was well known for his big cars and driving around at speed. He went to prison while he was in for speeding for a couple of days. This is our wing commander.
1 second, I'm going to stop you real quick. That sun's starting to hit the side of your head again.
Sorry.
See there? No, it's all right. I'm just gonna
So I hope we're doing all right, my love.
We're doing dandy.
Great.
Then after this, I'm going to get you just to cover briefly the flying you've done since you've been
Yes,
there.
yeah.
But we'll do that in a moment
Yeah.
when Vince has got you sorted.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and
All right.
put this thing up here. Really quickly.
No, this.
Now it's making his hair look like it's really,
Oh, like you've got a halo on.
yeah.
I need that because I haven't had a haircut for 6 months.
What do you need, Vince? Can I help?
Oh, I just need to get up there. Is that little,
There's a stool here.
yeah.
Oh, I know what I have got, Vince. If you want me to go in my car, I've got one of those. Oh no, because I took it out, didn't I? Oh shoot. We emptied my car so that we could get
Everything in.
So what I was thinking of isn't in my car anymore because I've taken it.
I know that feeling. My friend looks after a lady with cerebral palsy, and she weighs about 22 stone, I think.
Oh gosh.
And she can't talk, and she's in a real state. But if I go out with them, she has to take her wheelchair. Then my blessed stand. Boy, talk about packing the car. No, I've had to give up driving, and I just feel the end of life has come.
Well, mind you, I have a friend of the family, and I went when I was with her for 5 days the other week. She'll be 104
Oh well.
in next week, and I said to her, at one point she was like, "Oh, I don't want to." This is a few years ago when she was like 99.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "Oh, I just don't want to be here anymore." And I said to her, "Well, so how do you feel about still being here and you're 103?" And she's compass mentis; she's perfectly fine. And she said, "I've just now decided that I think what it is there's obviously a reason I'm here." And I said, "Exactly." I said, "There's whatever the reason is." She said, "God obviously has a plan for me, and there's a reason I'm here."
That's the way I see it. I sat here the other night and thought, what's life all about?
Right.
I can't get out, I can't do this. And then I do all this work on the phone with the church. I've got specific jobs that I do at different days. And I write the family news, what's going on in the church. And I've got different tasks that I have every day. And that's what you need, is something to aim for daily.
Exactly.
And although I don't talk to anybody much, you wouldn't believe it after I've not stopped talking, it does get a bit lonely, But as I say, Jo rings me every morning, 10 o'clock. She went on holiday to, where was it, Cyprus a couple of weeks ago. Rang from Cyprus every day, dead on, 10 o'clock. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
So a really good friend.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely.
Right, I'm with you.
So, yes, so we're ready to go again. So yes, so you just tell me, what flying you've done since.
Yes, well, when my late daughter Pip was 21, I bought her a flying lesson, and out of Manchester, and she thoroughly enjoyed it. But when I was 65, when I retired, I'd had a pretty bad dose of illness for a month or so. But anyway, on my birthday that sort of following year, she bought me a flying lesson. And that was with Raven Air in Manchester, a little private flying unit club. And then either she or I bought myself a flying lesson every year till I was 90. So that meant flying out of Manchester Airport with all the jet airliners, and you really had to be pretty cute. Not so much taking off, but certainly coming into land. I remember one day I was dual. I had a proper pilot with me, but I had all the controls. But you can probably see from my window, there's a big tall block of flats over in the corner there. And that particular day, we'd done a 2-hour run to North Wales and back. And we were circling at 1,500 feet, waiting to get into a spot to land. and suddenly the air traffic control in Manchester said, right, there's a 747 going behind you and there's a 737 in front of you, or Beef or whatever it was. Go. The chap I was with said, I can't see anything. He got glasses, he couldn't see his aircraft or anything. So I had the controls, and I managed to get behind this B-37 because there was this 747 coming up behind, probably about 120 miles an hour. So the first one landed, I got down, I bumped just once and then just got straight out of the way as the 747 went past me. And as I was taxiing back to the unit, the chap on the air traffic control, he said, that was a lovely landing, sir, just because I'd bumped once. But I used to enjoy those yearly flights. And then I did, in fact, I heard of a tiger moth that used to be available that actually came up to Barton Airfield. And that was an experience. This tiger moth eventually came in from the south, and it was a woman flying it with a dog in the back. And anyway, she landed and we sort of got together, and we got to have helmets. We flew all the way to Liverpool and back. And coming back, I was flying all the time, and she said, have you ever done this before? I said, well, years ago I flew a tiger moth for my first experience of flying, and I was so scared, and I was sort of grabbing the controls column like this, and there was a flight lieutenant instructor. For God's sake, let go of the bloody thing, it flies itself. He said, all you want is to hold it with your finger and your thumb and don't do anything. And I never forgot that. And all the way I was flying with this woman, I was with finger and thumb. And she could tell, even though she couldn't see me, that I was flying with finger and thumb, because the tiger moth is so sensitive, you know, it would fly itself almost. So that was a little experience. And yes, I had that. And then, yes, it was all light aircraft that I've sort of got lying out on the table there.
Now, of the things that you've got, are we okay about with the sun, Vince?
It's starting to wrap around. Let me just lower it a little bit. Sorry.
Just, the other things that you've got laying out on the table,
Yep.
is there anything we haven't discussed that you have on the table?
Well, I've got all this course notes, which are unique. There's my logbook, which shows you I flew solo after 7 hours and 2 minutes, I think it was. And that was another thing. If you didn't go solo before 11 hours, you were off the course. Yeah, that was the finish of you. There were lots of spots where you had tests, and if you didn't meet the test, you out of sort of each intake.
That's it.
There's probably about 200,
Yeah.
about 200, I suppose. A good quarter got through off the course for one reason or the other.
Oh, wow.
So it was quite a, you know, they were pretty tough on failing. Yeah.
It's good as long as you're not blocking it, Vince. As long as you're not the one who's blocking it.
This is a lovely room because they hit the sun all day long when we're there.
Exactly. It's just, I'm not sure if it's you who's blocking it though, Vince. Oh no, that's good.
Okay.
So so did we talk about everything that you've got out on the table?
I'm just trying to think what I put out. I put out those course notes of the logbook. I've written my sort of a summary of my career as an air cadet, and obviously I've put my service numbers and what happened to me after. You know, I stayed until 1948, and sort of I became a pretty useful MT officer, let's put it that way, which I never, I really couldn't drive, but I was a good organiser, and I don't say that boastfully. I still am. I love getting things, and when you came, and I thought that's pretty good going. You're only a bit over your estimated time. I'm calculating all the time.
We would have actually have been on time.
I know you would have done. Yeah, no, I mean, I admire your journey. I mean, it's England's a lovely country, but it's bloody confusing if you want to get anywhere, especially if you get in the back lanes and there's no signposts.
Now, because this is going to be shown in the documentary, but also it's going to be used on Falcon Field's reunion,
Right.
is there any messages that you have for the people who are attending the reunion?
No, I suppose it's a general message that for any of the lads that are still alive, and we're all pretty ancient now, it was good to be with you. We were real pals. We really got to know each other, and we had all our different sort of levels of understanding. Some were, well, some went and enjoyed themselves every weekend. Others stayed in, like I did, for all different reasons. But we got on pretty good. I don't remember anybody falling out with anybody. You got to know different people closer than some others, and before we got to Arizona, there was two chaps, Alan Boyd. No, he didn't come to Arizona. He went to Canada. But there were a couple of chaps I'd known all the way through my time in the RAF prior to getting there, and many minor thing. When I started work, when the war started, I was a trainee telephone engineer in a telephone exchange, and in April '42, I decided I'd volunteer for the RAF. And something I only found out a year ago, a piece of paper slipped out of all my bump, was a little note from the area manager in London Communications Region to the Ministry of Defence, saying that this employee is released, because I was on a reserved occupation, is released on condition that if he doesn't qualify as a pilot, he must come back. So if I'd have failed on the course, I'd had to go straight back to the post office. And I never knew that. I'd never seen that. And I don't know where or how, it dropped out of an envelope only a couple of years ago. So that was an interesting factor in my life, you know. But then, having got sort of clearance, it took a year to get called up, to get training. I should have been training with course 17, really and truly, but life isn't like that. Yeah.
The universe has a way.
He certainly has. Certainly had a way with me, I tell you.
What am I missing, Vince?
The only thing I would say is, do you remember there being a swimming pool?
Sorry, love.
Do you remember there being a swimming pool?
Oh yes, which I could never swim very well. I nearly drowned when I was 5. We used to go to a little island called. Do you know Canvey Island in the Thames?
My friend lives there, actually.
Really? Well, we used to go there in the 30s, and it was the cheapest holiday that you could get. And you went into almost a hut. There was no water. There was no toilet. When we got, I was probably about. Gosh, I was only about 7, 6. And my first job was to go and get a bucket of water for drinking water and dig a pit for the toilet. But I was sitting on the seawall with my grandfather one day, and the tide was either right out or it was right up against the wall, and because the island got flooded, as it did in '53, if the wall broke. But we were sitting there watching the ships go by, and there used to be lots of liners going up and down the Thames. And on that particular day, 3 liners all went by, 2 going one way and 1 going the other, but they were all doing it together like that. Created enormous wash. And we were sitting on just at the top of the wall, and this wash came right up to the top of the wall, took me away, and I can remember being under the water, and I can remember my grandfather's hand coming down and dragging me out. And from that day on, I just swimming, you know. So when we got to Arizona with this beautiful ball, which everybody used to dump in and swim and jump, Jack never went in because I was scared not to be able to. I couldn't get there and compete with these blokes that could swim and crawl, and all I could do was stand and pray I didn't get the cramp. So I missed that swimming pool, really and truly.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that's good.
I think, oh, no. Are you surprised that people are still interested in the pilots that came from Falcon Field?
Oh yeah. I mean, we were nothing. I mean, I ended up doing nothing flying-wise, and I mean, when you look at it, the majority of us, we only flew for about 9 months. I feel a fraud. But then I've made up for it by doing these extra flights every year till I was 90. You know. I've always been interested in flying. Just a side issue. I was the eldest. I don't know how to put it. I had lots of young aunts and uncles, and I had an aunt Ev who was probably 11 when I was born. But she took me under her wing when she got to about 21. And I can remember she took me down to Tottenham Marshes, and there was, they do all the refuelling now, what was it called? Anyway, it was a flying display on the Lee Marshes, and I can still see this de Havilland Rapide, 5 shillings to fly. Of course, she couldn't even afford 5 shillings for us to go in this. But, you know, and she took me to a Haringey motorbike racing, and 2 or 3 I would never have done without this Ev, you know. In fact, she went out with the goalkeeper of Tottenham Hotspur for quite some time, and he became the manager and for years, but she never got married, and she died quite a few years ago now. But and I had a younger sort of uncle, Ralph. He was only 8 years younger than me, older than me, and we palled up as well. He had a motorbike. He got me on the back of a motorbike once, so scared stiff. No, I was sort of an in-between bod, as it were. Because my father was in the Navy, he joined the Navy in 1916, joined the Army at 15, forged his signature. His mother poured him out to the Army, and he immediately joined the Navy as a boy seaman. And his father was a chief petty officer at HMS Ganges who trained these young seamen. But he had a fantastic life. At the age of 17, he was on a fishing trawler which used to go out in the Atlantic, and they would be pretending to be fishing to lure a U-boat to the surface. And as soon as the U-boat came to the surface, they'd open up a big 4-inch gun in the bows. My dad was in charge at 17 of a gun to shoot at U-boats. I mean, these days people don't leave home till they're 25. And he went on. He went into submarines. He was in I don't know if you ever heard of a steam submarine. They had boilers on board. They were the fastest submarines in the world. And he was on what they called the K-22, which had actually been the K-13, and that actually sunk off the Isle of Wight somewhere along the line. The two little funnels, when it was on the surface, acted as smoke, as it were. They didn't get shut down. The whole submarine filled up with oil. All the chaps were killed, and then it was pulled up and revived, called K-22, and my dad served in that for 3 years. He got an extra £6 a day for doing that. And he trained as a deep sea diver. I got another £6 a day for that. And then he went on a course for 2 years in Devonport to train as a mechanician. And well, he didn't come out in the Navy till 1946. So he spent 30 years in the Navy, and we never saw him. He was either at Scapa Flow, he was in the Mediterranean for 3 years. I never saw him. I can remember coming home when he came home from that 3 years and peering through the letterbox and seeing his hat cap at the end, and I was scared to go in. I didn't know what, I hadn't seen him for 3 years. Here, you've got radios and videos, and if they stay away for 6 months, everybody's crying.
6 minutes.
Well, absolutely. How my mum lived, I don't know. She was fantastic. But and then my mum died when she was 50, and somehow my dad got remarried quickly, and we sort of drifted apart, and then we came north, and that made it even worse. And I managed to get down to him just as he died, but we didn't really know each other very much.
What a shame.
Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Do you ever wish you'd have gone back to Arizona to visit?
Oh yes, I would have liked to have gone back actually, but as I said, my wife wasn't very well for quite a while, and our youngest daughter was born after all the others had grown up. All I've done is looked after children all my life. No, it would have been nice to go just for the experience. But having said that, I've studied Arizona and Phoenix, and in Phoenix now, it used to be Phoenix, Tempe, Mesa. But now Phoenix goes out to Apache Junction. One mass of houses. It's incredible. While we were there, I did pal up with the chap that used to teach us Morse and Aldous Lamp. And he had a cinema in Tempe. And every now and again he'd give us free tickets to go to his cinema. And he was a really nice bloke to work with. And I remember him coming in, instead of going into Phoenix, I used to sort of, not exactly study, but I did things on camp, and he would come in on a Saturday sometimes and give me individual lessons. So I got a lot of pluses by not going elsewhere. I was a bit of a loner. I've always been a loner. So. And somehow I've always ended up like coming home alone and going into the RAF alone. It meant to be, I think. Anyway, I don't know if I've given you what you want, though.
No, it's been absolutely perfect. Am I missing anything, Vince?
Great.
So what we'll do is Vince will get a picture of the things.
All the